You're really the main event here, but just okay. Cool. Great to see everyone joining, whether you're on our YouTube live stream, on LinkedIn, or you're here with us in the Google Meet. We're going to get started in the next couple minutes, but really appreciative of everyone joining. And this is going to be a really great one, and looking forward to introducing everyone to the topic. I'll just give everyone a couple more minutes and we'll get started. In the meantime, actually, let's hold off for another minute. I was going to say introduce yourself, but I have a few words I want to say in advance. I got to get the first and last word in, Adam, like that. I just first and last. No, just joking around there, but good. Yeah, great to see people joining here slowly but surely. Hopefully, everyone's having a great Friday, and I hope everyone has some nice weekend plans. I'm actually here in London, and I'm looking outside. It's 5 p.m. here, and we have sun. We have some hints of sun here, so that's very unique. Even though I've been a bit spoiled this week in London, it's been actually pretty sunny.
Been extremely hot.
All right, let's get. Yeah. You were saying in Long Island. Being from New York City myself, it was so chilly up until up and including the day that I left last Saturday. But at some point, summer was going to come. It's elusive these days.
We're in the low 80s now.
Wow. Is it really humid with the 80s?
It's kind of humid, yeah.
Yeah, and I'm sure in New York itself proper, like Manhattan, it's probably overwhelmingly humid and it smells, and the subways are the subways. So you're good being on the island there. Well, great. Let's get started. Thanks everyone for joining. We're also going to post this, or if you're listening to us through the community, then I'm also going to post a bunch of clips onto LinkedIn. But thanks for everyone joining. I'm really excited about this topic. I'll first introduce Adam briefly, and then just the general idea. First, the general idea of Adam's been a really great supporter of Custom AI Studio, but beyond that, I would consider him to be a good friend of mine. I think over the past few months or so, got to know Adam really well, and very impressive background, really down to earth, and that's what we're all about here, just trying to get past the fluff, past the BS, and just talking to real people about real things in their life. And when I learned about Adam's background, I wanted him to talk mostly about AI and digital marketing. We're going to talk about that, but there's so much more, really. And Adam brought this to my attention, just about how AI has affected all of our lives, both personally and professionally. So meet Adam Sandler, or Adam I. Sandler, AI Sandler. We were just laughing about that before, but he's from Long Island, New York, as we were just saying. He's a strategist who has really been around for just about every digital wave at this point, from dial-up up till today. So if there's anyone, and being such a young guy and all that, very impressive background, but if there's anyone we're talking to, it's Adam, as we're seeing yet another shift as we're currently in it with AI. Adam's seen a lot of different shifts. This isn't his first rodeo, but obviously AI presents some new challenges and opportunities, which we're going to discuss here. Just as a little bit of his background, he's run Verizon's live social media war room at Edelman, overhauled the global digital shelf at Mondelez International, and led a portfolio of health and wellness powerhouses at Nestle Health Sciences. And after 2 decades inside multinational enterprises, and that also included a stint, if I recall, with Sam's Club and Campbell's, which all very reputable names. Of course, everyone's heard of them. Adam saw the same pattern as kind of I could summarize it, and he'll do a much better job. But each tech leap handed more leverage sort of to outside agencies while shrinking in-house control. And Adam also saw the AI wave, and he wanted to be a forerunner in it instead of just, I guess, being behind the wave, riding the wave. He wanted to be the wave. And that's something we really love to see. So that's why in late 2024, he launched his very own Sandler Digital Advisory, a consultancy that helps small and mid-sized businesses break free from bloated retainers by installing lean AI-powered workflows. Obviously, correct me if that's not the greatest summary there, but hopefully that encapsulates. But also 3 months later, just recently, you also founded the Viable Edge, an educational platform that turns mid-career marketers into AI-fluent operators through tools like the Creative Solution Builder Kit and weekly case study rich newsletters, which are all really exciting. And I hope everyone will join. At the end, also, We'll include a link to Adam's YouTube, and would love for you guys to follow him in the chat here. I'm also putting his LinkedIn so that you guys could check him out in the background here. So with all of that said, and that's just really Adam from a professional standpoint. From a personal standpoint, Adam's a father. He's a husband, a father of two teenagers. He actually was at the weekend yesterday at the Meadowlands, which is amazing that you made it out alive. So we're also going to touch on some of his personal life as well. So with that, I know that was a long intro, but you have had such a wonderful long career that is obviously continuing to grow. I had to at least do some justice to it. So let's just start out very basic with our first question here, which when did AI first feel real to you in the marketing world? And what was your initial reaction? And then I'm going to kind of couple a few other questions with it. Maybe use this as an opportunity to correct anything in your background. Maybe I did not do enough justice to. Tell us a little bit about yourself. Sure. And maybe also go into just your personal journey. I called it, or maybe you called it, I called it a job title haircut at some point in your life, and how that has affected you. I know those are a lot of questions in one, but when did AI feel real? Tell us a little about you, how the AI has affected you. Let's start professionally, and then we'll go into your personal life.
Sure, yeah. So you got most of the details right. I touched all of those brands you mentioned, some of them in an agency capacity, right, where they were my client. But you know, I did come from the enterprise world. I worked at American Express as well. So, you know, big companies, very bureaucratic, a lot of different people that are required to participate in any one given outcome or project, right? Over the years, rose up the ranks and was leading a digital team. And so got a lot of experience understanding how to manage digital brand strategy and really sort of develop strategies all the way down to tactics and tactical executions with teams and as a team leader. As a lot of people are experiencing right now, when I was at Nature's Bounty for a while, they were acquired by Nestle, and then I was laid off and had been floating around a little bit since then. That was roughly 2 years ago, I think. And just by happenstance, launched my personal consultancy, which was very oriented around marketing, not so much AI, and started using AI in a personal capacity to manage the work. And over time, really started to unlock the power and the value and understand the true capability, right? And so to your question of when did AI become real, it became real when I realized that it could enable a capability, right? So in the traditional agency model where maybe you're like renting capabilities, right? Or you're paying someone to do a thing, I think AI unlocks the ability for internal teams or independent operators to now use and operate that capability, right? So when we think about things like content generation or managing workflows and building workflows that have real impact and can save real time, those are opportunities that are now present for people like me who don't have a technical background, but have the experience, like understand how the sausage is made and what the desired outcome is, right? So now I'm at a place where I'm able to sort of bring that to life for my clients, right? Build content engines that have real quality output, are founded in the brand architecture, which I also spend a lot of time and effort partnering with my clients to develop, and making that a dynamic, evolving process, right? And, you know, one of the great things about AI that, you know, it's, if I could do it, anyone could do it, I believe, right? And so I want to take this capability to my client and be able to walk away, right? I've worked with enough agencies where they're locking up the value, right? And sort of gatekeeping that because it's how they survive, right? And I don't want to disparage agencies, right? I think there's a lot of value with a lot of great agencies, but I've also seen a pattern where maybe it's this threat that they feel where certain things are locked behind a gate, and I don't think it really favors the client. I think it favors the agency more. And so I really want to position myself to address that. And that's where AI becomes real, right? Does that answer the question?
100%, that and much more. It's just one of those, and this is the theme of this, is what is the impact on AI for all of us? And that's the impact on yours, which I think just about everyone out there can relate to. Industries are changing. People are being redirected into new jobs. There are the threats of layoffs, as we were talking about right before this. And we're going to go more into your children in a little bit in that relationship, because I think it's fascinating what we were chatting about before. But you're relaying your daughter's about to go to college in the next couple of years, and the CEO or someone at Anthropic you were mentioning, and I recall seeing it, was saying, look, all these entry level jobs are not going to exist in short order, so everyone's going to be affected by it. As a parent, personally, you're going to know someone.
Yeah,
that's the part of AI that is the bad side of AI, is the very, where is this going? Do I have control over my future? All of that. And I think you really lay that down in some really personal terms. Going back to a little bit of marketing, and I'd be curious for the marketers out there, let's say your daughter wanted to go into marketing, is graduating tomorrow, or already graduated, it's June 6th, and now is looking for a job. On a scale of 1 to 10, I guess, and I don't care if you use the scale, it's sort of something, 10 being like they should be really concerned, but like, how much uncertainty does AI introduce for marketers today? And do you have any advice for them? What factors push that number up or down for you in severity? Yeah. Maybe you can go through that a little bit.
Sure. Yeah. I mean, from a broader, professional career standpoint, I think we're at a 9 or a 10 when it comes to uncertainty, because I think, there's the disruption is happening, right? We're starting to feel it. It's going to get more dramatic. But I think there's also a flip side to that, where like AI enables certainty, right? So like in the way that I operate, I can use AI and be certain that I'm going to arrive at an outcome, right? I don't have to worry about like, okay, well, I'm not an analytics expert, so I don't know what I'm going to do to address this problem. There's certainty in the way that I can approach a challenge where I don't have the capability or expertise. And that to me is very comforting, right? I can prompt my way to a good solution and outcome that I can work with. So there is a lot of certainty from that perspective. And I think like that's how I would advise marketers to think about it. How do you turn that uncertainty into certainty? You have the tools, right? And you can build that knowledge for yourself to get better at working with AI, to expand your capabilities based on your experience. I think this might be applicable to people who are a little more seasoned. I think it's a very different question and answer for people who are newer in their career. So I want to think of a better answer for that dimension of it. But another element of this is instinct, right? Having, a couple of decades plus in this field, I've developed a lot of instincts, right? And that's something that I think AI doesn't have, right? It doesn't necessarily read the room, right? And I think, that's where a human element and, bringing my very specific background and experience, and, which would be different than someone who has the same amount of experience, right? Just a different story. They'll have a different instinct. I'll have a different instinct, right? Like that's the voice, that's the uniqueness and the perspective that I bring, right, to that equation. And that's where, I couch my real value. So that's how I would advise other marketers or people who, are sort of characterized as knowledge workers these days. It's your instincts and how you wrap that experience into what you're producing today, right? And it's very cliche, but I always think about like the Picasso parable story where he draws on the napkin, right, and tries to sell it for 1,000,000 francs, and a woman's like, well, you just drew this on the napkin for 5 minutes. How is it worth this much? And he's like, no, it took me 40 years to get to the point where I could draw this on the napkin, right? Very cliche, but it works, right? It's applicable. That's kind of how I feel about this moment, right? And the napkin is Claude, basically. So that's how I would advise, right? Read the room, right? Understand and be aware of your ability to read the room. Trust your instincts. When I'm working with AI, I'm constantly disagreeing and challenging the responses that I'm getting. And I've noticed that reaction or my response in those cases yields a better output, right? So follow your instinct. Don't just do what AI tells you to do because it's the right thing. Don't be a slave or a robot to what your AI is telling you to do. Make it your thought partner. Challenge it to challenge you on the things that you're not thinking of, right? I get a lot of value of like, hey, where are the gaps in this strategy? What haven't I thought of, right? And I think, use that to hone your instincts further as you go.
Such a wonderful answer. And I think bringing it back to the human level, especially when it comes to marketing, which is just such a human experience of relating to others. And look, you've probably forgotten much more than I've ever known about marketing. So just, bear with me with what I have to say here. But, it's not manipulation but you're trying to convince someone of something. And that's a very human experience, trying to create angles. And I just actually wrote a Medium article that's going to come out next week about memes and how memes have taken over AI. But the general idea of it was very similar, where memes are a very human thing because it's taking something that we know isn't funny and then throwing irony on top of it. Marketing has a lot of those aspects where that's a very human experience. Will AI at some point be able to fudge it and figure it out? Maybe. I think we're going to enter in an age where AI has more personality, understands us more and more from its NLP. But at the end of the day, I think understanding the human component, especially that Picasso example, is just so perfect. I know it might be cliche, but it resonates a lot to me as a doctor, any professional. In any case, why do doctors charge so much? Well, because they can, and blah blah blah. But also, when you see a doctor, let's say like my dad, who just retired, but he was an ENT for 50 years, you're paying for his experience, years and years of hard work, figuring out how the human body works. Anyway, it's applicable to everything: law, marketing, where experience is just so important, and it makes a huge difference.
Yeah.
Now I'm going to try to nail you down a little bit, Adam, on one thing. And if it is such a difficult question that you can't answer it, you can't answer it. But let's see if we can try. If a mid-career marketer feels their role is shrinking because of AI, and you touched on it a little bit, what do you think their first practical step would be? Do you say, screw it, get a new job? Or what are you really telling them in reality?
No, it is a hard question to answer. I'll give it my best shot, right? I think there's a lot of opportunity for education and self-enrichment and growth. I think that there's still a lot of merit in the classic, find yourself a mentor, right? Find yourself a personal coach, right? And I'm not saying go hire somebody, but find someone in your network that you can lean on and you can sort of work with to help establish a vision and a career path, right? And I think AI can come in and maybe sort of, it can do day-to-day stuff, it can do higher level thinking, and we talked about instinct, right? I don't think it's gonna give you instincts, right? So I think there's an opportunity to figure out how to develop those instincts, right? Maybe there are academic approaches to, looking at case studies and doing some self-enrichment and learning, right? There's a lot of value in reading there's a lot of wisdom out there, right? From a lot of great authors that you can use to sort of develop your point of view and your worldview, right? So in the absence of the opportunity to develop, hands-on experience, I think there needs to be a deliberate and proactive effort to fill that learning gap in other ways, right? Whether that's, as I mentioned, finding people in your network you can lean on, consuming a lot of well-regarded books and wisdom out there, and enable yourself to get to that point where you feel good about your instincts. And from there, how are you extrapolating that into value, right? How are you applying that in real world use cases, right? I just left a career working at huge companies with a lot of teams and people to completely independent, right? And if this was 10 or 15 years ago, and I think about like, okay, well, what would I do? Right? I would probably just start doing work. I would start making up ways that I can create value on a test basis, right? Come up with some hypotheses, do a mock marketing case study. I think it's starting to flex these muscles to get to an understanding of how you can articulate a unique value where you might not have the experience to put behind it, right? I don't know. Does that make sense? I'm going a little off the cuff here.
Definitely.
Yeah.
No, not at all. Actually, that makes perfect sense, and I think it's really sound advice for. I think you gave wonderful advice, in my humble opinion, to the freshies who are coming out, and also the mid-career who, you really have to feel for the mid-career folks, because you're promised something in life about what the trajectory is going to be, and then all of a sudden there's this veer off that I guess you could have seen it coming, but no one saw it coming this fast. No one could possibly say that they knew it was going to come this fast if they claimed they knew that this was coming.
Yeah,
so it's just one of those things.
The way that I think about that is like, we know there's disruption, but we don't know what that disruption looks like, right? So I think prepare for the disruption, be ready for what it looks like.
Yeah, prepare for the worst and hope for the best, or something like that. Sounds right. And I think it also underscores it's not a waste of time to prepare for various scenarios. Even if those scenarios don't happen, one of them might, and you're going to be in a much better place if you're prepared. Whereas you could look at it as an exercise in futility where, well, I have no idea. I'm just wasting my time thinking about these different paths. I beg to differ. I think that it's well worth your time, at least on a Saturday, Sunday, or spend a day to think about like, where could it go and where do I fit in that?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, this is a very tactical example, but the way that I've learned how to develop workflows and really, mold AI how I want it to work was doing personal projects on my own time, right? And then bringing a lot of those learnings into professional use cases. For me, it's fun, right? Like, I think the technology is fun to work with. But yeah, I think what you're saying is spot on. Like, I guarantee that if taking on personal projects like this, there are unintended outcomes that might be even more valuable than the intended or expected outcome. There's always
really
learning.
Well
right?
put.
Yeah.
That's a great bow to put on that. And that's awesome. The great. Well said, Adam. Moving just a little bit in a different direction, because I just can't help myself. Given you have so much agency experience from an outsider, an insider, however you want to say it. I mean, you have inside knowledge. You have knowledge from the fact you still work with them, is my understanding, on occasion if required for the projects. Obviously, you want to do what's best for your client, but you're solo now. So you've said, and I this is kind of like a blanketed statement, but I really want people out there to have a bit of an understanding of when you go to an agency, what you're going to get. And it's not all bad. I know we're going to maybe have some negatives associated with it, because right now that's maybe the industry standard, right? To go to a big agency, Ogilvy, something like that. But there's so much to be said about the solos or smaller companies that don't consider themselves agencies. So let's just, again, maybe go down to the negative route with agencies just for a second, to open people's minds about some other possibilities out there. So in the past, or maybe paraphrasing, you've said agencies can tax the AI knowledge gap in a certain sense, and really exemplify it, and rather make it really exaggerate that gap. Can you share a recent example where you replaced an expensive agency workflow with a leaner AI powered one, sort of from a solo perspective?
Yeah. So, and I would, even zoom out a little bit to not even tax just the AI knowledge gap, but just tax the knowledge gap, period. Right. And, we were talking a lot in our last conversation around developing brand architecture. Right. And historically, this is a process. If you're developing a brand architecture, positioning, messaging hierarchy, customer segmentation, you know, all of these different elements, voice and tone, you know, that would be a $25,000 line item on a scope of work and take 11 people sitting in a conference room for 2 weeks, right? And AI has democratized that to enable one person like myself to, you know, produce the same outcome in, you know, a day or two. And the tax part of it is, and I hope this is answering the question, is unlocking the dollars that would be sort of like going into that process to be doing real work, right? In the form of paid media, for example, right? So you're the way that I like to think about it is that you're sort of like removing the dead weight from your marketing dollars, which AI has allowed now. And I think that this is sort of exemplary of a lot of services that agencies like brand agencies have historically delivered and sold, right? And I think it's a model that it needs to be disrupted. It's a model that I used to participate in, to be clear. And I don't think it's necessary anymore. And when I work with clients and I'm seeing that there's a lot of money that is like, you know, it's going in, but it's not coming out. It's not returning the value that I believe it should be returning. That is a tax, right? And that is the dead weight. And now we have the technology, the tools, and with the right people and expertise to make those dollars be able to deliver value, not just documentation, right? And so like, not necessarily a workflow, but I have a process to develop a brand architecture, right? And to develop a brand architecture in a compact and in a manner in which it is designed to evolve, so it can fit in a prompt, basically, to deliver the same outcome and much faster, much cheaper, and in a way that doesn't tie up your dollars. It doesn't create a dependency on a third party, and brings a capability to the team so they have the control over the brand that they should have.
Beautiful, Adam. That's awesome. And let's just take this one step further. You're a professor. I don't know. What's your favorite university? Whatever. Your favorite university, you're a professor, and you're the big time university professor. And it's an executive level program, and you're speaking with just chief marketing officers at any level, could be small to big companies and enterprise accounts. What criteria would you recommend? Maybe academically, I said it from an academic standpoint, or however you want to take it. What criteria should a CMO or other similar stakeholder use to decide between hiring a specialist agency, let's say Ogilvy, just because a friend of mine used to work there, so it seems to come to mind, versus bringing in a consultant like you, versus maybe upskilling their existing team in some way or form with AI or with literal people? Take it in any way you want.
Yeah. I think it's a great question. And I think, you know, there's a lot of different aspects of executing marketing where an agency, I think, is required and very helpful. In my experience, a lot of that comes in the form of, you know, executing advertising in market paid media, retail media networks, you know, bringing in specialists to manage that, who have the relationships, understand the dynamics of that. Maybe this is a little bit of a tactical element to this. I think there's always going to be some value in those types of specializations, but I also think that there's perhaps more value in nurturing your people, right? In building and skilling a team and enabling them to execute the softer elements of a marketing capability or infrastructure. And if it takes a consultant to come in there to, you know, enable that training and bring those lessons in, you know, that I think is a very potent and clear path to extracting the most value from your dollars that you can, right? If you're bringing the capabilities in-house enabling them to grow, using technology like AI to accelerate it, to take the tactical busy work off the plate of the people who you're paying to think, not to type. That's the path that I'm inclined to push on, right? And that's very much the approach that I try to take when I'm working with my clients. I love going out of my way to sort of, peel back the curtains on how the sausage is made, whether it's a simple workflow or just talking through things like brand architecture. So I think that for the things that are non-specialized, or that really, just take great thinking and knowledge and experience, build a great team, bring in consultants to fill the training and knowledge gaps, and, as necessary, build the technology infrastructure and train your team on how to use the technology infrastructure for specialized capabilities, whether it's data analytics, maybe some of that could be in-house too, specialized data analytics or market research, paid media and advertising, or even, creative execution. And I know we're not talking about so much, sales and business development in this conversation, but that's where, I would look to outside partners for those sorts of more specialized executionary elements for marketing.
Well, Adam, that's a great response. And then picking up that thread just a little bit, and narrowing down from a little bit more generality to more specifics, what AI tools that you feel comfortable sharing, of course, but which AI tools or processes have been real, for lack of a better word, game changers for keeping your one-person practice competitive with full service shops, or however you want to refer to these bigger agencies?
Yeah. My favorite and my go-to is Claude, which I've set up as, my advisory board, essentially. So leveraging the capability to use compartmentalized project knowledge in their projects, and leveraging a lot of the MCP tools to enable workflows through platforms like N8N, have been where I've gotten a lot of personal use and have brought implementations for use for my clients as well. I also use Cursor a lot. I'm not doing anything crazy, but I've created some simple apps, vibe coded, if you will, on enabling things like onboarding processes, content calendar management. So creating bespoke apps that are designed for how my client works, not like, and the sort of counter that I like to mention is not like having to sort of shoehorn themselves into like a Monday.com, right? Where Monday, and nothing against Monday.com, it's a great platform. Sometimes it's more complex than what a client needs. Sometimes they get lost just trying to configure it, right? You're spending all your time trying to set it up and train everyone to use it, versus getting the value out of it, right? So I think that, leaning into the opportunity to now develop apps for people who are non-technical, with things like, vibe coding, and there's like an emerging, vibe marketing concept coming out of this now too, which I really like. There's a lot of opportunity now, right? Like, so you don't need to sort of mess with Monday.com. There can be a custom bespoke app built for your team, right? Understanding how they work, even understanding the people and the names and their roles, right? That, they can get going with right away, it's like the reverse Monday. It's like, I'm not going to sit there and configure Monday. You're right. I'm going to configure this based on how you work. And I've done that a couple of times, and really proud of those kinds of solutions. Does that answer the question?
100%, Adam. And that's awesome. Just, this is why I really wanted everyone to hear from you, amongst a lot of other things. And then the next topic, which we're about to get into in just a second, about a little bit more of your personal life, because I just love what you're doing with your children, and I think you have a really cool perspective there. But no, that is exactly spot on. It brings to mind really what Custom AI Studio is all about, whether it's a shameless plug or not, just going to bring it up. But you were touching on the idea that really AI, and you were saying like, I don't necessarily want to go into sales or whatever. AI doesn't care about these artificial departments. Everything is intertwined at the end of the day if we really think about it. Marketing and sales, customer success, I mean, they all feed into each other. AI is agnostic and basically going to say, these interdepartmental walls, if we were going to talk to the AI, this makes no sense. What is wrong with you guys? Well, for humans, we need, some kind of like, the buck stops with this. This is the final. But AI doesn't care about those things. So bringing down the barriers of these different departments, as you've been saying, using these AI tools, or you've been alluding to, is really the goal of the agentic operating system. A swarm of AI agents connected to a centralized agentic database, breaking down the walls from different departments. Now, just to add one quick question for you before we move on. Why Claude over OpenAI? There may not be some profound answer and we can move on if there isn't, but I'm always just curious why someone uses OpenAI over Claude. I have sort of my own thoughts, but everyone comes up with their own.
Sure. I mean, I do use both for different use cases. Claude, I find, just has a much more sort of thoughtful and nuanced style of responding. I feel like I get a lot more value and insight out of the way that Claude responds when I'm not hitting the context limits 3 times a day. So, I for whatever it is, and this is not new news, right? I feel like this, this is echoed in a lot of different corners of the internet. Claude just sort of has a more professional, in my opinion, a more professional disposition when it's providing responses, right? And also I find it a lot, for me, for the way that I work, I have a much easier time, quote unquote, training Claude to operate that I want it to by leaning into that project knowledge, right? So that's really what it boils down to for me.
Yeah, I've had very similar experiences, obviously not identical, but that's been my similar experience. For whatever reason, I gravitate towards ChatGPT and OpenAI, but Anthropic with Claude, like, I love it. I don't know. I feel like they're interchangeable at some point, but Claude is much more professional. When I want to come up with ideas about how I want to run a sales team, I go to Claude. If I want to talk about memes and shit posting, which is my blog for next week, I go to ChatGPT, and it just it's more fun. I have more fun with ChatGPT, and Claude is when I really want to get down.
I feel like ChatGPT is kind of like, it's sort of like emerging as like, okay, this is like my personal / life go-to, right. And Claude is more of like my professional go-to, for better or worse. I do use ChatGPT for professional related items as well. And I appreciate features like the persistent memory that they've, launched, which is, I think, is great. Problematic in some areas, obviously, with all the sycophancy. The features that they release, like the canvas, obviously the image models, right? Like all of that stuff, the bells and whistles are really nice, right? I would say the nitty gritty for Claude is where that shines.
Cool. Yeah, very well said there. For anyone interested, OpenAI, and we were talking about this earlier, just sent out an email, I guess, to whoever subscribes. I'm nothing special in that world or in any world, but certainly that world. But they sent out an email about all these great updates that they have, including an MCP layer, a few other things like recording meetings and whatnot, which may change my approach. I have to look further into that. If anyone hasn't received that email, let me know. I'm happy to forward it. Like Adam, I said, I'm sure you got it, and it got lost somewhere if I sent it along. So that, they're changing. Maybe Claude had something to do with that. Mm-hmm. Anyway, let's move on to what has interested me. Not the most, but it was definitely up there on the list of things between your professional and personal life. I'm going to keep this very broad. I had some specific questions, and I might go into them if the conversation requires it or demands it. But tell us all what you were kind of in whatever way you want to about being a father and parenting, and how AI has had an impact on that.
Sure. Yeah. So, I have a daughter. I have 2 kids, right? My daughter's 16. My son is 8, not a teenager. Both of them have their own ChatGPT accounts. High school, and there's obviously a lot of cultural conversation around AI use in academic scenarios, right? A lot of kids use it for cheating. That's sort of like the main concern here. However, my daughter, who, and I'm not trying to brag, but the proof is in the pudding. She's a straight A student. She puts in a lot of time, and uses ChatGPT in a study partner capacity, where she's created her own GPTs for her chemistry class, and she has 100. And she is using it the right way, in my opinion. And we talk about it a lot, and she tells me like how a lot of her peers use it, like the Google proxy or the answer machine, or the writing tool for not, or do the writing, right? So it's as her father, I'm very pleased that she's using it properly. At some point, it's not going to do her, the tests still require her to do the test, right? A lot of kids can probably get through the homework, or whatever, out of the classroom work is happening. In the classroom, it's a different story. So for me, that's the proof point that she's doing what she says. And along the way, she's going to be a junior, and within the next six-ish years, she'll be in the workforce, right? And at the same time, we're hearing about how the entry-level workforce is being crushed, right? Entry-level jobs are going away. Where does this leave her? And for now, I don't have the answer, but what I take comfort in, or what I believe in, is she's building skills innately by working with AI, and she's building skills that I think will be relevant and valuable for her ongoing academic career, and then later a professional career. She's understanding how to prompt, right? She's understanding the role of AI in this academic interaction, right? Which is how I use it, right? As a thought partner, as a business partner, as a not as a answer machine. And so that is where I highly encourage it, right? And I see her using it outside of academic purposes as well, when she wants to do research on the weekend or something. So I will continue to encourage it. There have been a lot of discussions where she's like, Dad, I want to make an app or something like that, right? And I'm like, well, what problem are you trying to solve? And that's where that conversation usually falls apart. But she's young, right? So I try to give her this awareness of be aware of where you are encountering problems, of where you are hitting pain points and friction, whether you're doing schoolwork or doing something personal. If you're hitting a pain point and friction, take a step back and think about wait, is there a solution here that could be, facilitated by technology, right? And that could be her cue to go experiment and create something. And given all of the skills that she's developing through prompting and tutoring, we don't like to say tutoring, actually. I won't get into it. Study partnering. Those skills will come into play when she's ready to solve a problem, right? So, that's sort of the perspective.
That's wonderful. And if I recall earlier, and you feel comfortable sharing, your son, though, also has kind of made his own app, right? Do you mind sharing? Because I was very impressed.
Yeah. So this happened this week. So my son also, he's 8, has his own ChatGPT account, and got it when everyone was going crazy with the new image model. He felt very left out. My wife gave in. I was against it at first, but it didn't take long before I realized that a similar sort of innate learning process was happening with him, where he was learning how to prompt to get the images he wanted better, right? And it clicked for me to say oh, look at this. He's actually, he's figuring out how to structure a prompt, how to get what he wants, right? How to get the outcome he wants, right? And, that got me over the hump real quick to understand and to believe that there's value even for him at his young age to be working with this technology. And this week, he's like, Dad, I want to make a game, right? And so we pulled up ChatGPT, the O3 model, right, which is great for coding. And he's like, okay, Dad, I want you to do this. And I'm like, no. you do this, right? He wanted to make a typing game, like, so you have to type words under a certain time limit. And he did it. He prompted his way into it without me having any direction or, you know, stepping in or intervening. The only thing I did was like point him to the chat box. And he loved like watching the code go down the screen. Neither of us have any idea what we're looking at, but it sure does look cool. And he developed the typing game. And the funny thing was, like, you know, he wanted to put an Easter egg in there. So he prompted that there's a 1% chance that in the typing game, the word that comes up will be poop. And it worked, right?
He's
and
an 8-year-old boy. You have to do that.
To play it. I got poop, and he lost his mind. It was pretty funny, but you know, it's hilarious, but like, it's a great learning experience, right? He's developing a comfort, and he's developing innate understanding of how to structure a prompt and to get the outcome that he intends. And, you know, and I think the same thing, like, if he's going to be on this track, you know, there's only value that he's going to realize by starting to develop these skills and this comfort this early on. So, you know, I encourage other parents out there to think about doing the same thing. I've thought about getting a family team account, right? That's where we are now. So yeah, so, you know, it's been a fun journey. They see me, I use a lot of voice dictation, which I encourage everyone to use. It's funny because, not to go too on a tangent here, but I'm a big proponent of using structured prompts and inputs, but also a big proponent of just thinking out loud into you know, an AI through voice dictation. For the, you know, different use cases, both have amazing results. Anyway, they see me talking to my computer, they're doing it now. My kids are now doing that too, using a lot of dictation. So, you know, I think there's a lot of wisdom out there that says, you know, interfaces are changing, right? I believe dictation is going to be one of the main ways to interface with technology going forward. So, you know, I think there's even innate skills being developed with that dictation way of inputting also.
That's great. You know, I know that you're modest, and also you don't want to be that parent, but I'll go there for you. Your children sound just so wonderful and so intelligent. A tribute to you, but probably more your wife. Not that I've ever met her, but a tribute to both of you as parents. Seriously, I know that you didn't want to go down and be like that parent, but and you're being humble. But your children are well ahead of the curve, and that's because of them. They are bringing this to you. You're not forcing it down their throat, which, you know, sometimes as a parent you obviously have to do. I'm not a parent, so I don't know what I'm talking about, but I assume sometimes you got to tell them what to do at some point. But other times
they have their moments.
Of course, they're kids, and an 8-year-old. Those are fun times. Anyway, yeah, I was going to go down memory lane, but we're not going to do that. I go down memory lane in my next newsletter if you want to get bored by how my experience with the beginning of the internet, and when I was 8 years old, AOL was coming out. So, you know, there was a whole world around that. Anyway, let's get back to kind of concluding this. We have 10 more minutes, so I want to get over to Q&A, but I think this really, I just want, probably as a quote more than anything, complete the sentence. Marketers who ignore AI today will blank.
Will be trying to call people like me to get them up to speed real fast.
Cool. That's what I was hoping you'd say there. Last question here, and then all right, Devin, yes. Let's just go into Q&A. I think that's great. Devin, what's up?
Yeah, I had a quick question, Adam. Let's say you are a marketer right now, and you're like, okay, it's either I scale my team of like supporting staff, like I get somebody on the ads, I get somebody on like the website, you know, I get whatever, right? You're scaling a team generally. Now with these tools, with Claude, MCPs, the way that you build your brand, the brand architecture, what does an actual marketing team look like as a company scales? Like, where does the human get plugged in? Where are the gaps with the AI right now? And like, how much can it take over at this point? Fundamentally, I imagine it depends on like the industry and the business and all of that, but any kind of general framework we can follow?
Yeah, it's a really good question. And I don't think there's any one answer to this, to your point, right? Like, I think this is probably a different answer for every company is going to have a different answer. But I think, what this boils down to is, accounting for the bottom line in the budget and where the value is coming, right? So, when you talk about hiring and scaling up a team, if, there's a baseline assumption, let's pretend AI doesn't exist for a moment. If you want to expand capabilities, you're either hiring vendors or you're hiring people, right? And there's expenditure involved in there. And in these cases, you have to rationalize the value of that expenditure and how is it returning, right? How are the dollars that I'm using to hire up or to hire out or to outsource going to turn, right? So now when we bring AI into the question and we can say, okay, this highly cost-effective technology can do some of this value turning where, that the sort of like question is the same, but like let me reframe that. The answer is the same. The question becomes a little bit different, right? So, different companies have different products or services or values that they're offering. And I think there are some companies where, you want a very human element, or there's a face to the brand, right? Or there are certain industries and verticals like healthcare where you might want a more human-led approach to developing marketing for sensitive matters or things of that nature. Thinking out loud a little bit on this. But I think there's that tactical level, right? Where like technology can fill a lot of the busy work gaps, right? So I think, there's probably a common denominator where AI is going to help any company with the tactical level. We're talking about above the tactical level where, you can have an AI help manage your brand architecture, but what we talked about earlier, like it's not going to have the right instinct to understand what's truly working and resonating versus what's not, right? And I think that's where you need to have the right skills and experience in the room to govern and manage that element of it. And it's obviously the technology is evolving so fast that it's really hard to like, will this be the same answer that I'd provide next Tuesday? I don't know. Maybe not.
Right.
But this brings me back to that sort of perspective on instinct and, really understanding the value of that instinct and experience, and enabling the technology to accelerate and amplify that, not necessarily like tape over it, if you will. I don't know, Devin, is that answering the question? I feel like I'm jumping around a little.
No, it kind of does because there's like no answer yet, right?
Yeah,
like,
yeah, and like I know it's a tactic. We talked about the LinkedIn example, like the tactical example before, and maybe this is just like a good way to help illustrate the point. But right, like if you're using AI to generate and launch LinkedIn content, right, and you're using engagement or metrics of that nature to evaluate the performance of it, what if there's engagement that is all from friends of the brand, right? Friends of the people who work there. That's not valuable engagement. And the AI is not going to be able to make that distinction, right? So, it's a very tactical example, but it's that principle that I'm trying to hone in on of like, that's where the human needs to step in and from an experience and instinct and professional standpoint, say like, whoa, like this engagement is actually not what we want to, couch our strategic development on, right?
I mean, part of me thinks, I don't know if others have questions, but part of me is like, well, if I give this thing all of our transcripts all the time and it's like constantly pulling like objections and it's got a pulse on like our ICP on social media and everywhere else, and we're just kind of like developing this really nice knowledge base, and then in addition to that we put together this really good brand artifact, and like that's like the only job that we do is just make sure that artifact is fantastic. It seems like everything else is kind of taken care of, right? Like it's just like plug it into a scale machine and we're good to go. And it's really hard to figure out. I mean, there's some little components where human in the loop is going to be needed, right, to kind of get it there, but assume that those aren't there. It's hard to see marketing teams be larger than, a couple people, right?
I agree.
Yeah.
I'm going to jump back in here. We're really winding down here. Adam, I want to give you an opportunity. Can you I provided a link for everyone in the messages. If you go kind of the top to your LinkedIn, if you Google Adam Sandler, you're probably not going to find this Adam Sandler. So check him out on LinkedIn. I also put all of our links for those who are not aware. I would love to see your YouTube link if you have it handy, and tell the audience a little bit about what you do on YouTube. And then I think we'll conclude it there. And if there's any Q&A, hit us up on LinkedIn, and we'll have another session, or we'll just answer one by one. But yeah, tell us, Adam, what are you doing on YouTube? And there's the link right now for everyone.
Yeah, I mean, partly in service of developing my consultancy, I'm developing a personal brand. It's called The Viable Edge, and I have a YouTube channel. I pasted the link in there. I put a lot of the same stuff on LinkedIn as well. And we touched on vibe marketing a little bit earlier in the conversation. So that is sort of like the angle that resonates with where my head is the most, of, accelerating the capability of what experience can do with technology that doesn't require deep sort of like, technical experience, basically. If that makes sense. So, I'm trying to, my goal is to provide value and wisdom for other people who want to build marketing capabilities that are founded in AI, right? And not necessarily focus on like AI as a means for a solution, but to really understand the right outcomes, right? And to, like, it's the way that I'm trying to build it, and I don't think I'm quite there yet, but it's like marketing first, AI second, right? And trying to bring my lessons and experience to my audience to build things that can achieve the outcomes that I'm able to achieve because I'm wrapping that experience in, right? Like we talked about the brand architecture in the workflow part of the conversation, right? Like I very much want to sort of build out a resource on brand architecture and how I manage that, right? So not quite there yet. Some of my content is a little bit more technical right now because I'm very excited about like a lot of the capabilities that is unlocked through MCP and Claude, working with N8N. And I try to create strategies that lean on Claude to do the heavy lifting, right? To not necessarily lean off platform and, build agents. That's where you guys excel, right? And I like the idea of like trying to enable Claude to do as much heavy lifting as possible for a really solid outcome. I don't know. I don't feel like I'm doing a great job of explaining it. Check out the channel.
You did.
I welcome your
feedback. Check it out.
Yeah.
Absolutely, Adam. No, that was great. The Viable Edge, AI Fluency for Professionals. Everyone check it out. The link's there. If you're on YouTube or LinkedIn, DM us or me or Adam, and I'll get that link over to you. Everyone check it out. It's really cool. I checked out a bunch of the videos. They're awesome. They're good for anything, even outside marketing. So, Adam, I want to thank you very much. Just a few reminders before we go. One, next week I have Chelsea Olson coming on. She is a LinkedIn guru. The theme of next week with my newsletter and my blog, I think they're awesome. These are some of the most fun that I had to write, and I really need it. The newsletters on the new age of LinkedIn with AI. I go through the history of social media, which also goes into the history of the internet. I think it's fascinating. Maybe you guys will too. And then I talk about LinkedIn, X, and Instagram and its ethical implications, where we are today with AI tools. And then I make up a whole thing called SyncNet, where I think the social media world is going. And then my blog is on shit posting and memes and AI. So why not? The cool name there. And check out again, Chelsea Olson next Friday. Adam, thank you so much. This has been totally one of my favorites. We're talking about AI in the real world, and you as a father, you as a professional. Thank you so very much for being on. We'll definitely have you on again.
Honestly, it's an honor being among all the guests that you have. You guys have such amazing guests. So, this was a highlight of my new career, to be honest. So thank you for inviting me and allowing me to participate.
Hell yeah.
Honor was all ours. Check out, if you're part of our VIP section, Devin, the next hour has a VIP only chat. So check out our VIP section, or check out our community, which is in the chat, which is free. And then there's a VIP section where you get to get some perks as well. Adam, thank you again.